Imagine walking down the street, hearing a loud bang. Everything starts to shake, and then you see a tsunami wave of molasses flying at you. Well, if you were in Boston's North End on January 15th, 1919, around lunchtime, this is what you'd have seen. The Great Boston Molasses Flood was one of the most bizarre tragedies in American history, occurring when a large 50-foot high storage tank filled with 2.3 million gallons of molasses exploded under pressure, sending a wave of dense molasses running into the streets at 35 miles an hour, killing 21 people and injuring 150. That's enough molasses to fill 3.5 Olympic swimming pools. Before tragedy struck, there were many warning signs that something wasn't right. The tank, which was owned by Purity Distilling Company, made weird noises each time it was filled. The tank leaked constantly since the day it was built in 1915, to the point where it was painted brown to hide all the leaks. Local residents would even go to the tank and collect molasses that was leaking out of the tank for their homes. When the tank exploded, it sent a 25-foot high wave at its peak of molasses, traveling 35 miles an hour. I guess the term slow as molasses doesn't apply to this case. Since molasses is 40% more dense than water, it had a tremendous amount of energy behind it when it came crashing down, pretty much wreaking havoc on anything in its path. The force was enough to sweep buildings right off their foundations and crushed. The molasses contained debris from the tank and other things it was picking up along the way, making it even more dangerous. It also crashed into the Boston Elevated Railway, momentarily tipping a streetcar off the tracks and causing damage to the railway's main support. Since the tank was very close to the Boston Harbor, it sent trucks and people into the water. Several blocks were flooded with 2 to 3 feet of molasses. After being swept away in the wave, many became submerged in or under the molasses and debris, leaving many fighting for their lives. The death toll could have been a lot higher if it wasn't for many people coming to the aid of those in need. Cadets from the Massachusetts Nautical School ran several blocks to start pulling people out of the molasses, along with the police, Red Cross, Army, Navy, and regular citizens. It's always sad when these tragedies happen, but it's encouraging to see people come together in times of need. A train conductor jumped out of his train and was able to warn another oncoming train before it went over the section of tracks that lost its main support. As bad as this tragedy was, it could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for the quick thinking and heroism of others. The rescue efforts continued for 4 days until they stopped searching. Another thing that kept it from being worse was the topography of the area. When the molasses spread, it either went into the harbor or it hit Copp's Hill, slowing it down. If the ground was slanted in the other direction, it would have caused a lot more damage. As you can imagine, the flood left an enormous mess. Molasses is one of the last substances you want to try to clean up. Cleanup crews used salt water from a fireboat to wash away the molasses and sand to absorb it. The harbor was brown until the summer. The cleanup in the area took weeks, with several hundred people contributing to the cleanup effort. It took even longer to clean the greater Boston area since people spread the molasses pretty much onto any surface imaginable, like seats of trains, telephone headsets, and into homes. It was reported that everything a Bostonian touched was sticky. So what was the cause of the tank bursting? Back in the early 1900s, there wasn't building inspectors or building codes and company oversight like there is today. The tank was constructed poorly and insufficiently tested. The people in charge of the tank's construction didn't have architectural or engineering experience. The metal was half as thick as it should have been. There was also issues with the quality of the metal and rivets that were used. The company ignored all the red flags, like the leaks. Just 2 days before the explosion, the tank was filled with warm molasses, only the 8th time in 4 years it was ever completely filled. The weather probably played a factor as well, with the rapid rise in the air temperature causing extra pressure on the tank. The air temperature was unusually warm for a January day in Boston. A combination of all these factors led to a rupture of the tank's walls. The evening after the flood, the molasses thickened quickly, once it was exposed to the cool nighttime air, which made rescue efforts even more difficult. In the aftermath of the molasses flood tragedy, the parent company of Purity Distilling, United States Industrial Alcohol Company, tried to blame terrorists for the accident, going as far as claiming a bomb was put in the tank. The early 1900s was a very business-friendly legal environment, with companies rarely being held responsible for negligence. In one of the first large class action lawsuits against a major corporation, with an investigation that lasted over 5 years, it was determined that the company was at fault, which was a very big deal at the time. They paid over $600,000 in damages, about $20 million today, to the families of the victims. The tank was never rebuilt. This disaster also led to a much needed change to safety rules around the country. A lot of the building construction standards of today are a direct result of the Great Boston Molasses Flood. The smell of molasses resonated for several decades after the flood. My family will be taking a road trip to Boston this summer for a few days. What they don't know is that we'll be stopping by the site of the molasses flood to see if we can smell any molasses. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Please subscribe for more historical videos. Take care.